Well, a few weeks ago, my mentor, Melissa Dodge, she used to be a DS in this area, she asked me a question as we were meeting together over Zoom. And she said to me, Shannon, what is your why? Why are you a Christian? Why have you dedicated your life to following Christ? And she said, I'm not asking why are you a pastor or why do you go to church, but why do you follow Jesus? And I think that question is important because if we don't know our why as Christians, then everything else becomes a lot less clear, a lot more blurry. If we don't know our why, then what's the point of all of this? So I sat on her question for a few days, and I ultimately came to the conclusion that I follow Jesus because I believe his way of life is better. Jesus offers us a better way to live. The values, the vision of Jesus' kingdom, they're captivating and compelling to me. Jesus calls me to something bigger and greater than I could possibly do on my own and through my own inclinations towards selfishness. So I follow Christ because he invites me to be more loving, more compassionate, more patient, more generous, and more joyful. I follow Christ because his way is better. But I wonder, what is your why? As a local church and also as a larger United Methodist denomination, I think we actually do a pretty good job of nailing down our why, of answering this why question. In fact, we even have catchy mission statements or mottos to help articulate our why. So in the United Methodist Church, you've probably seen this. Our why is captured in the mission statement: to make disciples of Christ for the transformation of the world. That's why we do all of this. That's why there is this group of believers called the United Methodists. That's why we exist as a denomination. And then as a local church here at First United Methodist Church of Excelsior Springs, I think we've also done a pretty good job of explaining our why we come together as a community, why we gather, why we do this whole church thing. It's in our mission statement. I invite you to say this with me. Our mission at First United Methodist of Excelsior Springs is to bring people to the living water, teach them to become disciples of Christ, and send them out to impact the world. That's why we're here. That's why we're doing this. This is our purpose. It's our why. However, even though we can easily answer this why question, I think we more often struggle with answering the how question. How do we get this done? How do we accomplish our why? How do we actually live this out? In the church, we are much less clear on our how. But if we really believe that Jesus offers a better way of life to us, if we really think that we ought to be making disciples of Christ for the transformation of the world, if we really believe that we should bring people to the living water that only Jesus can offer, then we need to know our how. How do we live this out? How do we embody this mission, this calling, and this purpose? How do we get other people excited about all this? How do we accomplish these lofty goals? And friends, that's where vision comes in. Our how is our vision. Now let me back up a little bit. Earlier this year, if you've been here at church the last few months, you may have heard some of this before. Back in April, we began a vision discernment process as a church to figure out our how, to determine where God is calling us for such a time as this. So some of you may have seen this already before, so I invite you to just kind of bear with me. But over the past few months, we've asked a lot of questions. We've had a lot of great conversations. We've done a lot of really good thinking. And we kind of came to this 3 pillars or 3 phases, and we were praying and hoping that our vision would emerge out of the center of these 3 things. The first is our own hopes and dreams and goals and desires as a church. The second kind of phase or pillar was looking back at our past, rediscovering our church's history and our story and our DNA. And then also looking towards our community, the people who are our neighbors but don't yet go to church here. What do they need? What are they hoping for to find in a worshiping community? So when we ask that question, what makes our church unique? What can only we offer our community here in Excelsior Springs? What do we want to see for our church? You all participated in a survey, and from those, we came up with some themes or some ideas, things that might help us shape or craft this vision. Well, a lot of us feel like our church is like a family. We hope that when you come here, you feel like you are surrounded by family. And many of us think that that is true for our church. We also hope that our church would be supportive of people not only in these pews, but of people not yet a part of our community. Similarly, we want to be a church that reaches out to the community, that is outward focused, not just centered on ourselves. A lot of you were also compelled by this hope that our church could be open and accessible and welcoming to all. And finally, we long to be an intergenerational faith community where people as young as Scout and old as some of you are all worshiping together. That's what we hope to see in our church. And so we came up with some great ideas. And so we kind of moved on to this second phase or the second pillar. And as a part of our 140th anniversary celebration, we went back and we looked at our history, who we have been as a church in the past. And again, we came up with some themes or some guiding directions. First, we have a long history here in Excelsior Springs, 140 years. We were the third church established in this town. That's incredible. We also have had this dream to be of service to the community. We have this history of vibrant youth and kids programs. And once again, as you trace our history throughout the years, we have always tried to be a friendly, welcoming, and hospitable church, a place where all feel welcome. But friends, then we got to pillar 3, our communities and our neighbors' hopes and dreams and desires, and we kind of stalled out. We couldn't gain clarity on that part of the vision. It was still blurry to us, like we weren't wearing our glasses or we were standing on top of a foggy mountain. And then that's nobody's fault. As a church, we've done a lot of great things this year, and we've had more pressing needs come up. We've had to address changes in leadership. As people have left, we've needed to fill in those gaps. As an administrative council, it became very clear to us in the summer that we needed to pursue a different style of leadership, of governance. So we started doing some training and discernment to move to the simplified or simple board structure, which you all voted on last week at our church conference. But now I think it's time to get back to our how. It's time to get back to our vision, to figure out where God is calling our church over the next few years. Now, I have a confession to make. Earlier this year, as I was planning my preaching calendar, as I was looking at all the things I wanted to talk about this year, I had bookmarked this Sunday as Vision Casting Sunday. This was going to be the big reveal. This was going to be the celebration, the culmination of all of our hard work as we came together and said, this is it. This is the vision. This is where God is calling us. How exciting. But unfortunately, we aren't there yet. We haven't yet quite nailed down our how. So I turned back to that scripture that I shared with you at the beginning of this process in Habakkuk chapter 2. And did you catch what it said there in verse 3? This was really encouraging to me. There is still a vision for the appointed time. And if it delays, wait for it. For surely it is coming. It will not be late. There is still a vision for the appointed time. But we might just need to wait a little bit longer. These things, they can't be rushed. Our former district superintendent, David Gilmore, he would often say, God's time, not my time. And there's many things that might delay a vision, many roadblocks or setbacks we might encounter. Things like internal conflict, financial setbacks, even new and exciting opportunities that come our way that might distract us for a time. As folks left our church, as our own fears maybe got in the way. I think a lot of times we as a church, we often get caught up in what's called the tyranny of the urgent. We can't think about what's ahead. We can't look forward to our future because we just have to deal with what's in front of us right now. Or we might delay a vision because of fear of failing. I know that I'm guilty of this. I've been a part of a lot of church staffs and ministry teams, and we do all this work and we come up with this great vision, this great plan, and we announce it to the congregation, and then you hear nothing about it. A month later, a year later, it just goes nowhere. I didn't want that to happen to our church. I didn't want this to just be another failed vision campaign. Or I think we might delay a vision because we're not ready for the change that God is calling us to. We're not ready for that new thing that God is doing. It's hard to change. It's easy and it's comfortable, it's familiar to just keep the status quo, to keep things exactly the way they are. We like things the way they are. It's hard for us to change. But even if all these things might delay that vision, Habakkuk promises it is still coming. There is still a vision for the appointed time. And I think in the meantime, we have work to do, even as we wait. Now, we're getting ready to enter the season of the church that we call Advent. Advent is often considered the church's new year. We start the new Christian calendar. But Advent is also a time where we celebrate waiting. We are eagerly and joyfully waiting to celebrate Christmas and the birth of Jesus Christ. We're also expectantly and hopefully waiting for Christ's second coming, his return one day. And even though Advent is this time of waiting, our waiting isn't meant to just be sitting still, twiddling your thumbs. It's an active waiting. We still have work to do now, even as we wait for the vision to be revealed. So I want to share with you 2 ways that we can be active in our waiting, and a third way that you can all help us make that vision a little bit clearer. The first thing we can do as we are active in our waiting is to experiment, to try something new and to see what works. I've been reading the book Mission Possible for the Small Church as I've been learning more about the new simplified structure. And the authors of that book, they encourage churches to try a new ministry experiment every season, or at least 2 or 3 times a year. And this year, you all have done a great job with experimenting. I think back to September, we tried a new thing with our community share day. We partnered with another local church and we gave out tons of hygiene items to the community. We had a bounce house and face painting for the kids. That was something new and different, and we experimented to see if it worked. We also did a pet blessing back in October, and this isn't something we've done in a while, but again, we partnered with another church, and it was so fun to see all of your furry critters and creatures come. We had our second trunk or treat just a few weeks ago, and we had 175 folks come through our church parking lot. Many of them connected to our Treehouse preschool, but some who have no previous connection to our church. We are doing experiments, and that is great. But I think sometimes we need to realize that experiments fail, and that's okay too. Sometimes ministries or programs, they don't work out as we had hoped or expected. But that's okay because it helps us learn something new and try something different next time. At a conference event I went to last month, our bishop was speaking to all of us pastors, United Methodist pastors in Missouri, and he encouraged pastors and churches to do just this, to experiment, to try new things. But he also added a caveat. He said that if these experiments don't pan out as we had hoped, that we should fail fast, that we should stop it and move on and try something else, try the next thing. So over the next year, we are going to continue to experiment. We're going to continue to try something new, even as we wait for this vision to become clear. Now, the second thing that we can do in this waiting is evangelism. Now, I think in the church, evangelism has become this dirty word. We never want to be perceived as pushy or as confrontational, as, pushing our faith onto other people. I also think that we've made evangelism far too complicated. During seminary, I took a class on evangelism, and I had a stack of books this high, no kidding, that I had to read on evangelism, like 9 or 10 books. But at its core, evangelism is simply reaching new people for Jesus. It's just talking about Jesus, sharing our faith stories with others, inviting folks to church. And evangelism, it gets back to our why. If we really believe that Jesus offers a better way of life, then wouldn't we want to tell everybody about that? If we really believe that he has something to give you, to offer you, we would want to shout that to the world. Once again, the book Mission Possible, it says some great things about evangelism. The authors write that in churches of our size, evangelism is not an extra. What that means is that evangelism isn't an extra program. It's not an extra committee. Oh, let's start the evangelism or outreach committee. It's not something that only the pastor does. It's not something that only the missions team does. It's something that we all need to do. Evangelism is embedded into every ministry, every event that we hold. Everything we do as a church is an opportunity to invite your friends, invite your neighbors, to share God's love, to extend friendship and community to people who might be feeling lonely. In fact, building relationships in evangelism is something that churches of our size can do particularly well. We might lament that we aren't bigger as a church, but I love that I can look out from the pulpit on a Sunday morning and I recognize if there's a new face in worship. I love that if you invite someone to church, you can say, I'll meet you in the parking lot at the front door. We can walk in together. We can sit together. When I was a part of a really big mega church, I might invite someone to church and they might come and I would never see them. The services were so huge and there were so many different worship times and there was 15 different entrances to the church that I might say, were you able to make it to church? I didn't see you. And they said, yeah, I was there. But you could literally sit down in a pew as a first-time visitor and no one would even know that you were there for the first time. You could just get lost in the crowd. But the gift of smaller churches like ours is this ability to have relationships. Just like Cheers, here, everybody knows your name. A person can't attend our church for the first time and just slip out unnoticed. At least I hope that that's not happening. So we're going to continue to focus on experimentation and evangelism, even as we wait for our vision, as we determine the next thing that God is calling us toward. But the third thing that we all need your help with is to talk to our neighbors. I think that a lot of times, especially in the church, we make a lot of assumptions about what people need. We might think that, they need this in a church or they need that at church, and we think we know what they need without even talking to them. A lot of times in churches, we might even start a program or start a ministry assuming that that's what people need, only for no one to come, no one to show up. We don't know our neighbors until we've talked to them. And that's where we all need your help. So we've made this really easy for you as a leadership team. We've put together a quick survey. It's like 5 to 6 questions. And it's just a way for us to get to better know our neighbors. So as you leave today, you're going to be handed a couple of cards. And these cards are not for you to take and fill out, but these are cards for you to take home, take to work, pass out to your neighbors, and just say, hey, my church is trying to do a better job of getting to know our neighbors, getting to know our community. Can you take 5 minutes and fill out this quick survey? It's totally anonymous, so people can be as honest as they want in their feedback. And this is just a way that you can say, I'm not inviting you to church. I'm not trying to sell you on any program or ministry. We just really want to hear from you. You can also, our church has shared this on our Facebook page. So if you have Facebook or if you have social media, you can even reshare it to your page. Just write something like, my church is trying to do a better job of learning about our neighbors. Can you help us out by taking this quick survey? Especially if you live in Excelsior Springs. My hope is that over the next week or so, we can hear from at least 100 of our neighbors in Excelsior Springs as we continue to discern what God's vision is for us, where God is calling us for such a time as this. As we move into Advent in a couple of weeks, As we move into this new year of the life of the church, let's make some New Year's resolutions to experiment, to evangelize and practice evangelism, and to talk to our neighbors, to get to know our community. Now, as I wrap up, I just want to say that I believe in the mission of our church. I believe in First United Methodist Church of Excelsior Springs. I think that our church is a gift to this community. It's needed in this community. And our work is not done yet. In fact, if you go back just one chapter in Habakkuk, in chapter 1, verse 5, we read these words: "Look at the nations and see. Be astonished, be astounded, for a work is being done in your days that you would not believe even if you were told." God is going to do something great and new in us and through us, something that will astonish us, something that we wouldn't even believe. God's vision is going to capture us and send us down roads we would have never gone down on our own. So let's be ready for that new thing that God is going to do. Let's be ready when God sends the vision for the appointed time. Will you pray with me? Loving God, we thank you for the opportunity to be a part of your kingdom in Excelsior Springs, Missouri, and the surrounding areas. Lord, over the next few weeks, as we try to take time to hear from our neighbors, to discern what it is that they need or hope to see in a church, allow us to have ears to hear and eyes to see. We love you, and we are grateful that you have called us to be a part of your mission and your vision in the world. Amen.